welcome back to Football Frenzy. I'm Zoe Alex. You're here with Alex Watts, as always, here for another week. Let's start off with news as usual. Alex, I know we were both pretty upset about this. It's another little fantasy thing, but George Kittle, finally came back, and now he's out for 8 weeks with a broken foot.
Yeah, I'm really upset about that because, he came off of a really, really great week last week. I think he had or 2 weeks ago, I think he had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, he was really getting me a lot of fantasy points. He got me 35 one week. But I'm just really upset because he is just not healthy. Neither is Garoppolo. They're both really banged up. And I think it's just super unfortunate because they were, maybe a Super Bowl team, but now they're probably not going to maybe not even make the playoffs.
I mean, definitely last year, to start the season, everyone was expecting that from them. But when they started, they didn't look very strong. And that was something we talked about a little bit too, where this 49ers team didn't have the same energy it did last year. And maybe that was because they didn't have Kittle for a lot of the beginning of the season. He got hurt. But the thing is that if you have to just play through Kittle and Garoppolo, and obviously this team has been plagued by a ton of injuries, your running back situation is pretty much decimated with Coleman and Mostert out. McKinnon hasn't been doing anything. And so really all you had left going into this week was Kittle and Garoppolo. And for them both to go down with injuries where they have no basic timetable of when they're going to be back. Even Kittle has a more standard timetable than Garoppolo does is really scary. And it kind of just sucks because I know I was relying on Kittle to get me through the rest of the season for fantasy. And, other than the 49ers, obviously they were. But their season was pretty much already down the drain. We all knew that. Just the energy wasn't there. But I needed Kittle, and I'm sure you did too. He's such a big piece of – if he's on your fantasy team, he makes up a huge chunk of your points, just the way it goes, because you spent some crazy pick on him early on to get him, or else he would have – everyone always reaches for him, because if you don't reach for him, you don't get him. And I think I spent a second-round pick on him or something. And for him to get –
I think I did too.
Yeah, exactly. For him to get 1 point this week and then go down, and now you and I were just talking about, do we drop him? Because he's out for 8 weeks. This team probably isn't going to make the playoffs, but if they squeak in with the weird playoff situation, he might not even be back for the playoffs. So it's unfortunate because there's not that many tight ends out there. And I was feeling really comforted and really settled in my tight end because I had one of the best tight ends in the league, if not the best tight end in the league. And for him to go down, I just feel a little uneasy about my season. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
Yeah.
I have less hope than I did before.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I had to make the extremely tough decision of dropping him, and I did drop him. And guess what I picked up?
Yeah.
Eric Ebron, your favorite person. Your
Yeah,
absolute favorite person.
That in itself just tells you how sad this whole situation is. I think I'll leave it at that. I'm going to start crying on the Zoom. So we're not talking about Eric Ebron. He's a disaster. Let's move on to your favorite. I mean, this isn't really your favorite, but Marlon Humphreys tested positive for COVID. I mean, you're the Ravens fan here. Obviously, it's a big deal, but what effect is this going to have on the Ravens?
Well, the Ravens were already having depth problems at cornerback because two of their starters have already gone down with injury, and the Ravens have surprisingly done nothing to fix it. So, I'm just upset, but that he has COVID, because it's always a horrible thing. I think he's asymptomatic, so that's pretty good, but it still has a big impact on the Ravens, especially since 3 of the 4 inside linebackers on our whole entire roster are on the COVID list for being too close to him. So I think that it's just a huge disaster, and I'm very worried that the Ravens are going to go into this week with very poor depth.
I mean, that was something that you and I talked about all season regarding them, right? So some of the picks, and maybe it is the Ravens' philosophy. I don't know. I don't track them like you do, but you always seem to think that if there's a big player to get, the Ravens get them. And they've pretty much proven that over the past year. They've picked up a bunch of ridiculous guys, even with the recent one in Yannick. But I think this one's definitely going to sting because really good secondaries are hard to come by. And the Ravens had established that, and this year it's kind of fallen off a little bit. And so they're not used to having the best one, but usually you need that veteran out there to carry everyone. And Humphries will be hopefully back on the field soon enough. At least it's not an injury, especially if you said he's asymptomatic. Like that, I don't know exactly. Obviously, COVID's all over the place, but his recovery time is probably going to be shorter than if he was like in the hospital, obviously. So I think all that Ravens fans and, the Ravens themselves can do is hope he gets back on the field soon. And if not, he'll just be cheering from home. Like, it's not like he's going to cut out from the team,
Yeah, obviously.
So every team has gone through, like, the COVID scares, and it just sucks that it was one of their best players. But I think you just have to hope that it didn't affect more people on the team, because that's always the worry, like, how did it spread?
Oh, if Lamar Jackson gets COVID, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, man.
Go steal Joe Flacco from the Jets.
No.
All right. And then, speaking of players that we haven't seen in a while, Joe Flacco we saw more recently, but Antonio Brown is making his return to the field this next week. He's on the Buccaneers now, reuniting with Tom Brady again, even after he genuinely didn't play with him in New England. But he will be playing the Saints this week. This is going to be weird to see Brown on the field again, I have to say.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's going to be really weird. I think that I don't know what football shape he's in. Hopefully he's in a good football shape. But, I'm just a little bit worried. Like, what if he sparks more controversy and tears the team apart? Like, it's just going to be bad.
I mean,
I think.
The fact that, like, the Buccaneers almost lost this week to the Giants is terrifying. So I don't think it would take much to tear this whole team down. But if anyone can do it, it would definitely be Antonio Brown. And I don't even think he might have to do much to do it. But I guess my question is, do you want to see Antonio Brown succeed? Because for me, I'm conflicted. Like, I love watching good football, but I don't know if I even want to see Antonio Brown succeed because of all the antics he's pulled and everything he's done. I get so annoyed when a player has to make everything about themselves and can't be for the team. And I think that was one of the biggest issues I've had with him. We talked about that with him. We talked about that with Le'Veon, where I love watching good football, but the Buccaneers don't necessarily need him. And I don't even know. Obviously, I don't want anything to happen to him, but, like, I don't know if I want to see him go back to where he was before. Just because, does he deserve it after everything he pulled?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, like, I'm a big believer in second chances. Like, obviously,
But he had a second chance. He had, like, 4 chances. I am too. I love second chances. There's nothing I love more than, like, a comeback story. I really do. But this is, like, the 5th time. If he had another chance, he blew it. He had another chance, he blew it.
Yeah, I'm just conflicted because, he has so much talent. I just don't want to see it go to waste, but I also don't want to see him getting paid for being a jerk.
Yeah, like, it's not like a Dez Bryant thing where, he left the Cowboys and then he got hurt, but he's trying to make his way back again. This is like, Antonio Brown didn't get hurt. He just was stupid enough to do things that booted him off the field.
Yeah.
So that's where I have the conflicting values, because I feel like, I don't know how to even describe it, but we'll see how he plays this week. Not that I want to say it, but I am really excited to see him back on the field.
Because it's Antonio Brown.
Exactly, it's Antonio Brown. And he hasn't played in a couple years, though. So that's going to be the interesting part, because as you mentioned, the football shape. Like, he might be in the physical shape to do it, but is he in the mindset of being on an NFL field against the best? Like, I don't,
I don't know.
And he knows all eyes are on him. And I know he loves that, but sometimes it can get to you too, the pressure of it. If he screws up, that's it. He's done. So
yeah. And unfortunately, I could see that happening to Dez Bryant,
Yeah.
Same situation. But he's coming back from an injury, so
yeah,
he
that's
really needs to get back up to speed.
Yeah, because people want Dez to succeed. But I think there's a lot of people, and I think I might be one of them, I hate to say it, but who honestly, like, wouldn't care if Antonio Brown succeeded or not. Like, I'd be just as happy if he failed out of the NFL than if he succeeded, just because I feel like, and that makes me sound like an awful person, but I feel like it's his fault that he's in this situation. Sometimes we get put in situations that we don't want to be put in, but Antonio Brown put himself in this situation.
Yeah, he definitely did.
And that's my issue with it all. So I'm happy that he's getting another chance, and that's fine. Take your chance. Go play with Brady. go to this crazy offense. But if you screw this up, you're done, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to recaps. So probably the biggest upset, we're going to talk about two big upsets, but I don't think there's an upset bigger than the Bengals beating the Titans.
I don't understand. I didn't see it. I haven't seen a single clip from that game, so clearly it was a pretty uneventful game. But I'm just really surprised that a terrible team could beat Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
He even played well. He had over 100 yards. He had a touchdown. But
And the thing is that it wasn't even like the Bengals won by a field goal. They won by 11 points. Like, that was
just
the
weird.
biggest thing for me, because sometimes close games happen and a team will blow something or something goes wrong, or there'll be a bad call. But 11 points isn't a bad call. 11 points is a failure of the Titans to do what they were supposed to do and go out and beat the Bengals.
I think it just shows Joe Burrow's leadership ability. Maybe, he was such a big leader at LSU, and I think that's carrying over to the Bengals.
I mean, I guess, I don't love him, but he did have 2 touchdowns. But the thing is that, so he had 249 yards, Tannehill had 233 yards. So that's not that big a difference if you look at that. And then they both had 2 touchdowns. So it really just comes down to the running. And Henry only scored 1 touchdown, whereas the Bengals scored 2. So I think, if anything, it comes down less to Burrow, because Burrow and Tannehill played at the same level. Mm-hmm. So, and there weren't a lot of turnovers on either side. But you mentioned something about the lines that I think you should elaborate on before we were talking. You mentioned something about the sacks.
Yeah. Well, Joe Burrow was sacked surprisingly 0 times, which I don't think that's happened with the Bengals this year, because their O-line is beyond awful. But I'm just so surprised because from what I see, especially from college, I've seen this a lot. When Joe Burrow is not under pressure, like Tom Brady, he plays really well. So I think what happened is that he was not under a lot of pressure. I mean, I don't know about the pressure stats or the QB hit stats, but from what I'm guessing, since they had 0 sacks let up, I think that he was just under no pressure and he was able to throw the ball on time.
I mean, I definitely agree with that one. I think, if anything, it just comes down to how the defense played. Because maybe Tennessee's defense, obviously Tennessee usually has a pretty strong defense. That's something we've learned from them this season. And maybe their defense just collapsed a little bit, because it wasn't awful. But in the end, Tennessee still had more yards. They had more total yards. They had 441, whereas the Bengals only had 367. So maybe it does come down to the line and just the touchdown scoring and the third down efficiency and things like that. But it wasn't like that. If you had looked at the game the way it went, it didn't seem like it was an 11-point difference, because the stats on paper are very, very similar. And it looks like it should be a lot closer than the Bengals having sort of a blowout against the Titans.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it was just bizarre.
Bizarre.
To watch a really good team that, upset the Ravens in the playoffs last year when they were 14-2, get beat pretty fairly by a trash team.
Oh yeah, the Titans have been one of the teams where we've looked at saying this season they're in the running for one of the best teams this year.
Yeah.
And they're going to make a run to go deep in playoffs. But if you can get beat by the Bengals, who were 1-5-1 going into this game, I think that's a little worrisome for you.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's just really, we'll talk about the predictions for next week and how the Titans will rebound for that in a minute. But before that, I wanted to hit another bit of an upset. The 1-5 Vikings beat the 5-1 Packers. So that was a little interesting
surprising
to me. They beat them by 6, so this was a closer margin. But obviously the divisional games, there's no one I hear more about, as a Lions fan. There's no one I hear more about than the other NFC North teams. All I hear is Packers, Bears, Vikings. But this was a surprise to me, just because the Vikings going into this year were supposed to be good. We talked about this. And then they kind of just fell off the map. And, where did they go? They had this great team. They had this team where they pushed everything. You lose Diggs, you lose a couple other guys on defense, and you just collapse. It just doesn't make much sense. You still have Dalvin Cook, who had, mind you, 3 touchdowns this game. So he really put the team on his back and led them through everything. But it's not like Rodgers and his offense collapsed either, because he had 3 touchdowns. Rodgers threw for 3 touchdowns. And then if you look at the passing yards aspect of it, Minnesota had 151 and Green Bay had 291.
Wow.
So Green Bay blew them out of the water with passing and offense. But
Mm-hmm.
it just came down to the Vikings defense, I guess, not allowing the Packers rush to pick up and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dalvin Cook going off. But
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
can't
Dalvin
wrap my
Cook.
head around how a team like the Vikings, not the Vikings generally, but the Vikings this year could beat the Packers this year.
Well, it's because Dalvin Cook is healthy. He's 100%, and I'm I'm just stunned by the game that he had. Didn't he have like 200 yards, 4 touchdowns, something like that?
Something like that. He had 3 touchdowns, but he had a ton of yards too.
That's crazy. Like, it's like super rare. It's like Derrick Henry type numbers.
And the thing is that Aaron Rodgers, the big issue for him is he hasn't had a running game this year, right? Because I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Aaron Jones didn't play, right?
Yeah, I don't think he
He was
played.
hurt. So that also could have affected it just because the Vikings have had issues stopping the run this year, but the Packers didn't have anyone to offer in the rushing game. And I don't love commending Rodgers, but I have to admit he is a fantastic quarterback and he's mesmerizing to watch. And the fact that he was able to still lead his offense to over 20 points and keep it within a 7-point game without any form of run defense and like half your receivers being hurt is pretty impressive. But
Yeah,
I feel like even a half hurt or even a mostly hurt Packers team should have beat this Vikings team.
yeah. I just don't know how to explain it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even think Kirk Cousins played that well. I'm just super
No, Kirk
surprised
Cousins
by the
threw like
outcome of
one
this game.
touchdown. He's so bad. He's
He is
unbelievably
bad. He's gonna leave soon. I'm calling it.
Yeah. All right, let's continue on. A little bit more NFC North talk. Don't worry, it's not the Lions. Even worse, it's the Bears. So we're going to predictions. We talked about the Vikings Packers. Obviously, we're gonna talk about the Bears, and we talked about the Titans. Let's continue with that. The Bears and the Titans face off this week. This is an interesting one for me, just because the Bears are a 5-3 team that I don't see as a 5-3 team if you just look at where they rank and things. So I was reading these out to you earlier, but I'll say them again just to prove the point. They're 23rd in offense, 20th in defense, 17th in passing, and 29th in rushing. So
Jesus.
how is a team that is on the bottom half of every stat 5-3?
Nick Foles. That's the only explanation. Nick Foles.
It doesn't help though. Like
Yes, it
most of their
does.
wins
It's Nick
came with
Foles.
Trubisky.
No, most of their wins came with Foles.
They have
Nick Foles
3 with Trubisky.
he just brings another energy, you know.
They did better with Trubisky than they're doing with Foles right now.
Interesting. I didn't know that, but it's just magic. It's Foles magic. He's too good.
And then
He's so good.
and the Titans, obviously, I think they're going to be out for revenge this week because they definitely played down to the Bengals level, and the Bengals played up to the Titans, but the Titans, there's no saying in that they definitely did play down. So they're going to come into this week wanting that win back just because they're used to being so dominant this season and they want that again. I think you're going to see Derrick Henry, when he gets that fire in his eyes and he just runs, I think you're going to see that a lot. But something I'm really, really interested to see is, even though I know they don't directly match up, I'm just excited to see the effect of Khalil Mack and his line on the Titans rushing and Derrick Henry.
Maybe. I mean, it could be it's going to be a very chippy game, because it's two very, dominant lines going against each other. And I think Derrick Henry may have the advantage because he's so clever at finding the open holes and breaking for long runs.
Derrick Henry will prevail. I certainly hope he will. I love seeing the Bears lose. It makes me so happy. Last time
I was about to say.
Last time these two teams played was in August, and the Titans did take that victory. So we'll see. Fingers crossed the Titans can pull it out. I genuinely think they can, just because they're lit up after last week and they want this. And I think
unless Nick Foles.
Unless Nick Foles just decides to be Superman. But I think this is the Titans' game to take, and if they lose this one, I think they have a more serious issue to deal with internally. And then one more prediction, and then we can move on to fantasy and everything else. But this is also an interesting game to look at: Seahawks-Bills, because both of these teams, usually you hear about the Seahawks, you hear about the Legion of Boom and how good their secondary is and their defense and everything, but their defense is ranked 31st right now.
Really?
So, yeah, I was just looking at rankings for them. And the Bills' defense isn't much better, 23rd, just a little bit. So this is obviously going to be an offensive game, and we both could have told anyone that. It's going to be Wilson and Allen. But how do you think the story of the game is going to go? Do you expect rushing or do you expect passing?
No, I 100% expect passing because it's I think, two quarterbacks maybe. And I think that it really is going to come up to, scores more touchdowns. If DK Metcalf could pop off, that would be great. And yeah.
DK Metcalf has been so good lately. He's a fun guy to watch. I was worried about his hands in the beginning. I know we had talked a little bit about his drops and everything and his route running, but he's been really good with that. And, we keep talking about this one tackle, but watching him chase down guys, maybe he should just convert to defense, but he's been good on offense too. So the 10th rated offense in the Seahawks and the 6th rated offense on the Bills will take on each other. Excited for that one. They're both at 6 wins on the season. Seahawks have 1 loss and Bills have 2, but the Seahawks have played less games. So we'll see how that one goes. All right, let's move on to fantasy because, enough of the predictions and everything. I feel like it's so repetitive with that. I'll say my guy first, and then you can go for it because I know you have a whole spiel about yours. So my guy is John McCall-Hasty, and I picked him just because I know the 49ers are so bad. I understand we just talked about how they have no offensive production. But the thing is that if they expect anything from themselves, any points, any yards, anything at all, any production in any sense, they're going to have to play through Hasty for the sole reason that everyone else is hurt. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a tight end. Everyone on your team is hurt. You have no running back committee. You just have Hasty and McKinnon. And McKinnon genuinely, last week, the 49ers were supposed to bench him because he had tired legs. So he's a running back in the NFL. You should not have tired legs, sir. So I think that in itself is an issue. And I think if they need to do anything, it's going to be through Hasty. And I have no confidence in the 49ers. I really don't. But I do have confidence that they're going to at least score a touchdown. I think that hopefully can happen. And if they do score anything, it will be Hasty that runs it in or catches it in. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I think he's a good person to have just because he's like the number 1 player on that team right now. And that's terrifying. But he is because they have no one else to produce. And if it was a wide receiver, I'd tell you not to do it because when you have a sucky quarterback, you can't physically get the ball to the wide receiver, so it doesn't work. But if you have a running back, they can literally take the snap directly at that point. Like that's cool. So I think he's a good person to pick up or at least stash in your bench for now just because there's genuinely no one else, and injuries have been the name of the game this season. And if you're going to capitalize on injuries, this is a great one to capitalize on, even though the 49ers suck. So that's all I got for you.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pick. And, I have 1.5 picks. So my main pick would be Gus Edwards. He's Mark Ingram is hurt. I think he's going to be out for maybe 1 or 2 more weeks. And, he gets so much production. Like you've seen, there's so much stats from the past. When running back 1 is hurt, Gus Edwards will always step in. Like he's always so consistent. He's a power back. He's young. And I think that he's going to end up, him and J.K. Dobbins will be the faces of the Ravens running backs. And that's like my other half, J.K. Dobbins, because he's also looking to get a lot of production. And I see that it's just going to be very good if you pick up either one of them.
I agree. The only thing that I have with the Ravens running backs is that they've shown this season that they don't play through one. And I know that if you're going down from a 3-man committee to a 2, obviously you're going to get more touches. But I'm just still worried because even if you add up all the numbers that the 3 of them have, they're still not great. Like the rushing game still low-key sucks. So that's just my fear about them. But I do think that the Ravens work better with 2 running backs. And if they can figure out how to use Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins together and in the same sense, I think they're going to be more than fine. I just think it's going to come down to play calling and adjusting to not having Mark Ingram. But if you think about that too, it's not that big a deal just for the reason that Mark Ingram hasn't done anything this season. So I like that pick. I would say either of those 3 guys pick up. If you have the option between Dobbins and Gus Edwards, I'd go Gus Edwards. But if at last straw you can pick up Dobbins, he's definitely going to get more touches than he would before. So, okay, moving on to red zone. Now that Alex's Wi-Fi has finally returned somehow, let's start. So last week, if we go over the questions, my streak of being 3 for 3 has sadly been broken because the question, does Rojo run for over under 100 yards versus the Giants? I said over, and he ran for under. So he came close. Didn't he have like 90 yards or something?
I don't know. I don't really remember, but I know that he did run for under 100 yards, so I got that one.
All right.
And then,
fine.
Yeah. And then the other two, surprisingly, we actually tied. We asked, does Tua throw for over under 200 yards in his debut? He threw for 93, so obviously we both got that. And then this one was the weird one. Who throws for more touchdowns, Drew Lock or Justin Herbert? And they actually both threw for 3, so we tied, gave each other the point. So it was kind of a weird week.
A little bit of a weird week, but I mean, it works out. You went 3 for 3. I went 2 for 3. So, look at you with the 3 for 3 week. Congrats.
Yeah. Lots of 3 for 3 weeks this year.
Oh, yeah. I've been waiting for that one for a while. All right. Let's move on to this week, though, because I think some of our questions for this week are interesting ones to look at. So the first one that we talked about is 2 running quarterbacks are playing each other this week, in Kyler and Tua. Who rushes for more yards?
You know what? I'm just going to say Kyler Murray just because he's more, acquainted to his style of play, which is, running the ball a little bit more. So I'm going to say Kyler.
I was going to say Kyler, but because you said Kyler, I'll go Tua. Just because Tua and the Dolphins won last week, but if you look at how Tua played, his grade, if you look at like his PFF grade, was not that good. And he definitely struggled. He missed a lot of open targets, and it was all masked by the fact that the rest of his team stepped up and played for him, and the defense stepped up and really played. But him and himself, maybe he led the team to do that, but he didn't lead by play. And I think he's going to come out this week looking to lead by play, especially against the Cardinals, who in my head have a similar scheme to the Dolphins because they both have a quarterback who can throw and they have receivers who can catch. But where you're going to shine is when your quarterback runs. And I think that's going to be interesting to see how it's going to be like scrimmaging in practice in a sense because you have 2 teams that are similar in the same strengths. And it's going to be like playing your offense against defense, except you're just playing a different squad. So it's going to come out to play calling and who has the most plays that work in a different way than other teams have seen. I'm going to say Tua just because of the play calling and everything. And I don't think the Dolphins are going to win the game, but I think that in order for them to stay in it, Tua's going to have to use his legs, and hopefully he does. So
maybe I think Kyler Murray is the safer option here. So
he is the safer option. Congrats.
Yeah, and then next question that we came up with is who has more passing yards, Josh Allen or Russell Wilson?
For me, this one is a no-brainer. I say Russell Wilson. I know the Seahawks have had some of their struggles, but the thing is, like, most of their struggles have been defensive. And Russell Wilson, they really, other than DJ Dallas, they really don't have a running game right now. And they have DJ Dallas, but that's about it. That's all they got. That's all they have healthy. So obviously it's going to have to be Russell Wilson, and him and Tyler Lockett have been syncing up, the two of them beautifully. He has DK Metcalf, as we talked about, who has been fantastic.
Yeah, he's
I think
crazy good.
Yeah, and just compared to who Josh Allen has and John Brown, who's a good receiver, but Allen hasn't been able to find him all year because he's been hurt, and now they just don't have the same chemistry they did before. I think you just look to the quarterback who's been there for longer and who's better at locating his receivers, which is Russell Wilson.
Zoe, I think you forgot about someone really important, which is, I'm going to pick Josh Allen. You know why? Because of Stephon Diggs.
Oh, Mr. Overrated?
No, not Mr. Overrated. He's a very good wide receiver. And, he has – Josh Allen, I think he has the stronger arm. I think he's the second strongest arm in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes, obviously. But, I think that Josh Allen, he just tends to throw more. And even if the Seahawks don't have a rushing game, I still think that Josh Allen's going to have more yards just based on the fact that he is just such a pass-heavy quarterback.
That's true. I mean, the thing is that he's a pass-heavy quarterback unless he just does everything himself. And versus the
Mhm.
Seahawks, they're really good at spies and doing that. So I just don't know if he'll have enough time. But I am excited to see this one. I think you're giving Diggs a little bit too much credit for everything, but we'll see how it works out. I say you go with the veteran, you go with the guy who's the MVP candidate year after year in Russell Wilson, but we'll see how that one works out. And then the last
Okay.
one of the day, we talked about the 49ers all day. That was a common theme. Do the 49ers put up over or under 2 touchdowns versus the Packers with all their injuries and their depleted offense?
Mm. I'm going to say over just for the fact that they have, they have somewhat of a defense, and they also have Nick Mullins himself, the legend, Nick Mullins. And I don't ever see the 49ers really putting up very low amount of points. So I'm going to say the 49ers are going to go over.
I get that, but I'm going to go under just for the fact that you don't see them putting up few points because they usually have at least one capable person on the field. And at the moment, I don't know if they do. And that's my issue with it because I understand like you can put in a different quarterback and sometimes it works, but sometimes you have to throw to your guy and all their go-to guys are hurt. You can't even like dish it out to the side because Coleman's not even there. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to go with McKinnon, who's tired legs, or you go with
Tired legs.
Easty, who's going to get a lot of production, but can't play all 4 quarters for this team. He can't carry them through 4 quarters. So
That's true.
if they
But,
score touchdowns, it's going to be like defensive touchdowns. But in terms of
yeah.
like offensive touchdowns, I don't think they can do it, especially it's not even that the Packers defense is that good. It's just that they don't have the capability to do it right now because everyone's hurt.
Maybe, but, we'll see.
We will see. That about wraps it up for us today. Thank you all for tuning in and listening. We'll be back next Wednesday, as always, with our weekly. Alex, thank you for joining me. We'll see you
Of
guys next
course.
time.